You're welcome, guys. And in today's class, we're going to be drafting a basic bodice. So the basic bodice is like the foundation of every style that there is. All right. So I have drafted out my horizontal line, which is going to serve as my startup line, and as well a vertical line to differentiate the front and the back. So we're going to be drafting the front pattern as well as the back pattern. So I'll just go ahead to label this as my front and here as my back. So everything I'm going to be drafting here is going to serve as my front, and everything I'll be drafting on this side will serve as my back. So we're going to start from our startup line to impute our horizontal lines. These horizontal lines represent our body lines because it is on these lines we're going to be putting a measurement. So before we get that measurement, we will need to draft in those lines. The first line I'm going to take, starting from my startup line, is my bust line. So this is my startup line. It's also representing my shoulder line. Okay, so what I'm going to do right here is just to mark up my bust line. So the bust point line I'll be using for this is 11 inches. So I'll just mark up that 11 inches. Okay, I will also extend this to the back area. And then I will draw a straight line. So the next line I'll be taking is my waist line. So from my startup line to my waist is 19 inches. So I would be marking out 19 inches as my waist line. So for now, we're going to suspend the waistline for the back and mark that letter. That is because the front waistline and the back waistline are not normally the same. When you take your measurement, placing the tape from the shoulder point to the waistline on the front is usually different. This is because that is usually different from that of the back. And this is because the front has a protrusion of the bust, making the measurement of the front and the back to differ. So the waistline for the front cannot serve as the waistline for the back. So this can differ from bust to bust depending on the bust size of that client. So right here, I'll be marking 19 inches as my waistline. And when we get to the back, we are going to note down the difference of the waistline for the front and the back and then put it at the back. So let's just mark 19 inches as my front waistline. And then I'll go ahead to mark this line. So the next line I will be taking is my full length of the blouse. So we are making a full scale foundation bodice. We have the half scale. If you're making a half scale, then you're going to stop at the waistline, but we're making a full scale foundation body. So we're going to be stopping at the length of the blouse. We also have a full scale for the dress. For this particular tutorial, we are making the full scale for just the blouse. So we're going to stop at the length of the blouse. So what I'm going to do now is just to mark out my hip line, because in some cases your blouse can stop exactly at your hip line or a little bit shorter than your hip line. So what I'm going to do is just to mark out my hip line. I'm going to take 9 inches from my waist to get my hip line. This is not exactly standard. Some people use 8 inches, some use 9 or even 10. Okay, I like to use 9. So from my waistline, I'll mark up the next line, which serves as my hip line. I would like to connect these lines. So I'll go ahead to label these lines. This is my bust line. This is my waistline. And this is my hip line. Okay, so the next thing we want to do now is to impute our neck measurement. Okay, so the standard measurement you get to use for your basic bodice is 3 inches for the width and 3 inches for the depth. You can as well use 3.5 inches for the width and depth if you're in a bigger size, but 3 inches will still serve the purpose for an average size. So I'll be using 3 inches for the depth and width. So I'm going to take 3 inches wide and 3 inches depth. I'll go ahead to draw a box, as this will help me to highlight where my neckline should sit. So right on this box, I'll be taking my neckline. I'll use my curve to draw this round neckline. So this is what I have. The next I'll be taking is my shoulder measurement. I'm working with shoulder 16, and our shoulder is normally divided by 2. So I'll be putting the value of 16 divided by 2 on the startup line, which is 8. So I'll mark from this point, set my tape at 8, and then mark this. So we are going to do what we know as the shoulder slope. Our shoulder is not exactly straight. Our shoulder is a little bit slant. So we want to also create that slant on our bodice so that we're going to have a fitted outfit when we are done with this. So we want to create a shoulder slope. Now you can actually come in by 1 inches. You can come down by 1 inches or 1.5 inches. 1 inch is actually a standard. 1.5 inches would give you a better fit. So you're going to determine if you want to go by 1 inch or if you want to go by 1.5 inch. However, I'll advise you to try both and see what works for you. Of course, you know we have different body types. So I may do 1 inches and it will fit perfectly on me. And for you, you will do 1.5 and it will even still be better on you. So you could try this when you're trying to explore and practice which fits better. So for this, I'll be going in by 1.5 inches. So I will create my slope from this point, and then I'll link it up exactly where my neck width stops. So this right here is my shoulder slope. So the next thing we are going to do now is to get our chest line. So we don't exactly mark the chest line, take the chest line when we are taking the measurement, because we can use a formula to get the chest line. The chest line is where the armhole sits. So to get your chest line, there is a formula. The formula to get your chest line is bust measurement divided by 6 plus 1.5. So you're just going to divide your bust measurement by 6. Whatever you get, you add 1.5 to it, and that way you have your chest line. So I'm just going to be dividing my bust measurement. I'm working with bust 42. So bust 42 divided by 6 is 7 inches, plus 1.5 is 8.5 inches. So I'll be coming down from this my shoulder slope by 8.5 inches, which is going to serve as my chest line. I'll just mark up a straight line. I would also extend this chest line to the back the same way we extended for the bust line. And then I'll just extend the lines like so. So this is going to serve as my chest line, and for the back as well, this is my chest line. And it is on this line we are going to be putting our armhole curved. So I'm going to draw a straight line to connect this. To make sure I'm on the same page, I'm just going to take my measurements, 8 inches, and be sure that I am at 8 inches here, and then draw a straight line. So this is a guide to which I'll be putting my armhole curve. So to put your armhole curve, you're just going to measure the distance from here to this point and find the midpoint. So what I have from here is 8.5 inches. I'll just bend my tape into 2 and then mark out the midpoint here. Now we want to create room for the bust to sit. Okay, so I'll come in by 0.75 from this midpoint we just marked for the front. Note this point we have marked. Then I will mark my bust measurement divided by 4. You know, we get to divide our bust measurement by 4. 42 divided by 4 is 10.5. Okay, I'm going to mark my 10.5 inches at this point. That's 10.5 inches. I'll mark it here on the chest line. So next, what I'll do is to create my armhole curve, making sure that my curve passes through this point and stops here. So this right here is our armhole curve. So the next thing we want to create is our dart. Dart intakes are what helps for a better fit of any garment. So because this is a fitted outfit, you're going to be taking in our dart. Now to get your dart line, you're going to take your nipple to nipple measurement, okay? So a bust nipple to nipple measurement will vary from one person and another. So whatever yours measures, you're just going to be dividing that value by 2 and putting it right here. So my nipple to nipple measurement is 9 inches, and 9 inches divided by 2 is 4.5. I'm going to be marking that 4.5 here. I'll also mark the 4.5 for my waistline, and then I will mark the 4.5 on my hip line. Next I'll do is just to draw a straight line that connects all these points. This line represents our dart leg. So we're going to take our dart. Now, how do you know the right amount of dart to take? It can differ from bust size to another. If your bust is between 35 inches and below, you can take a total number of darts of 1 inches. If your bust is 36 to 44, you can take a total number of darts of 1.5 inches. And if your bust is 45 inches and above, then you can use 2 inches as your dart. My bust is 42 inches. This means I'll be taking a total number of 1.5 inches for that. Now that 1.5 inches, I'm going to share it into 2. Okay, we're going to put half on this side and half on this side. So 1.5 inches by 2 is 0.75. So I'll be marking my 0.75 here, making sure that 0.75 is on this straight line. Mark it on the right and on the left. Okay. So in total, what I have from here to here is 1.5 inches, but we've shared it in both sides. Okay. So what I'm going to do on this bust point, I will come down by 1 inches. This is to avoid a pointy nipple dart. Okay. So it doesn't look like you have your nipple pointed on your outfit. We don't want that pointy look. We want to create a smooth flowing dart. So after this point, you're just going to come down on this point by 5 inches, or you can actually do 6 inches, but I like to do 6 inches if I'm making a dress. If you're making a blouse, 5 inches is just perfect for me. So now I have this point, and these two darts. I'm going to link out the darts like so. So right here, I've taken my darts. So the next thing I want to do now is to go in by our measurement. My bust measurement is 42, divided by 4 is 10.5. I'll mark that here, 10.5. My waist measurement is 35, divided by 4 is 8.75. Okay, so 8.75 is here at this point. But remember, we've taken a dart here. If we go ahead to mark out our measurement and leave it at so, when we wear this, try to wear this outfit, it won't fit because we've snatched in some measurement into this dart. Because at the end of the day, we are going to be sewing this in. Okay, so what we are going to do is to measure whatever you have here as your dart intake and add it to this measurement. So I've measured my actual measurement, which is 35 divided by 4 as 8.75. I'm going to be adding my 1.5, this one here, and replace it again here. All right, then I'll go ahead now to bring down my bust measurement on my hip line. If I was making a dress, I would go ahead to put my hip measurement, but since it's a blouse I'm making, I will be putting this measurement I have on my bust here, which is 10.5. So now that I have all my points, I'll go ahead now to connect these lines. So this is what I have, and I'll be using my curved area to connect this point like so. So it's okay if you find it straight. It all depends on your body type. So you may be wondering, why is it not curvy? Remember, we have a dart here. So when we take in our dart, it's going to shift in the waist, which is going to create that figure, that figure 8. Okay, so because I don't really have a small waist, that is why it's like this. But of course, when we take our dart, it's going to still shift inside. So this is the front part of our bodice. Okay, we are still going to be adding a bust dart, but before we get to that, let's draft the back, and then you understand why the front part or the front length is different from the waist of the back waist length. So we're going to start by drafting our lines, our body lines, and already we have our chest line and our bust line here. So the next line we want to draft out is the waist line. Now the front waist line for me is 19 inches, but when I measure my back waistline from my shoulder to my waistline on the back is 17 inches because of the protrusion of the bust. So we are going to mark out that 17 inches from this point. I'll be marking out my 17 inches. So the difference between my bust, my front waistline and my back waistline is 2 inches. Okay, so it is 2 inches difference from the back. So I'll just draw this line. So now that we know the difference between this front and back, I am going to mark out the bust line. What I'm going to do is to mark it out. The 2 inches, since I said the difference between the front waistline and the back waistline is 2 inches. This is from here to here is 19, from here to here is 17, and the difference is 2 inches. I will come and take in that 2 inches as a dart, so that when we sew it is going to shift up and align with the back. Because if you don't do it that way, when you want to join, you notice that the side is 2 inches longer. So we want to shift it up so that it's going to align with the back. So I've marked out 2 inches from this bust line. I've taken my 2 inches, and then because we are trying to avoid this pointing nipple, I'll come out from this dart leg by 1 inches, and then from this point I'll create that straight line. So we have taken a dart here as well, and this is called a bust dart. So let's continue with the back. Okay, we've gotten our bust line, our waistline, and then our hip line. So what you're just going to do, measure from what you have from here to here. Whatever you have, I have 9 inches. I'll go ahead to add that 9 inches from here. And then I will roll my line. So you can see that the back is shorter, but the front is longer. But when we sew in this dart, it will push up and blend. Okay, so let's go ahead now to impute our measurement for the back. We are going to start by putting in the neckline. The neckline for the back, we're going to be using same inches we use for the width. Whatever inches you use for the width on the front, you must use for the back. So I'll be marking in my 3 inches width neck line. So I'll mark my 3 inches. For the depth, I'll be going in by 1 inches. This is because the back depth doesn't have to be the same with the front depth. Okay, so I'll be doing 1 inches. So this is like a standard for the foundation. Okay, except you want to start doing other styling, then you can go in by whatever inches of your choice. But for a start, the foundation, the basics is 1 inch or 1.5. So I'll be taking in that 1 inch. So you can use your free hand to do this, or you can simply use your curve. So I'll just be using my curve to connect this. So this is my 1 inch depth. The next thing we want to do now is to come down to create our shoulder slope. Before then, mark out your shoulder measurement. 16 divided by 2. I'm using 16. So divided by 2 is 8. And on this 8, I will come down by 1.5. If you're using 1.5 here, then you must use 1.5 here. If you're using 1 inch here, you must come down by same thing you came down on the front. So I'll mark out my 1.5. and then I'll create that shoulder slope. So our chest line is already gotten. So what I'll do is just to be sure, confirm that what I have from this point is still 8 inches. And then I'll draw a straight line. Okay. So next I will do now is to mark out the midpoint from this point to this point. Okay. And then you can do that by folding your tape into 2. The midpoint we have here is 4¼ okay. And then for the back, I like to go in by ½ inches. Now the front I went in by 0.75. Some people actually go in by ½ inches, but I do 0.75 for the front and I do 0.5 for the back. So I'll go in by my ½ inches and then I'll use my armhole curve to connect. Okay, but mark out your bust measurement right on the chest line. For me, I'm using 10.5. Okay, and then I'll connect, making sure that my curve passes from here to this point and touches this point. So we have our armhole curve for the back. So the next thing we want to do now is to take our dart as well for the back. So to take our dart, we're just going to add up our nipple to nipple measurements, the same line we got here. That is 4.5. In my case, I'll be marking my 4.5, and here as well. This is my nipple to nipple measurement, 4.5. And then I'll draw a straight line joining this point. So I'll be taking in the same dart intake I took for here, which is 0.75 on both sides, a total of 1.5 inches. I'll do that here as well. So I'll be taking 0.75 on this point, 0.75 on this point. Now for this point, I don't need to come down because there is no bust on this point. So there's nothing like a pointy nipple at the back. So what I'll do is on this point, I come down by 6 inches as we did for the front. And then I'll connect my darts from this point. For the front, we came down, but here you don't need to come down. So you just connect your darts. So the next we are going to do now is to take our measurement. So my bust measurement by 4, I will impute that right here on the bust line, 10.5. My waist measurement, 8.75, plus the ½ inches we have here. (8.75) plus 1½ inches that we have here. Okay, so here, and then I'll replicate what I have here on the hip line, 10.5, and then I'll draw out my lines. So guys, this is our basic bodice. Next thing we're going to do now is to create our zipper bulge tightening. Now, zipper bulge tightening is simply the elimination of a bulge on that zipper area, especially on the back waistline. If you don't do this, when you make an outfit, you realize that your zipper is bulging out. So what you're going to do is to take a dart on the waistline and on the zipper line as well. So what we're going to do now is to take whatever you have used for your dart here and here, you're going to be using it on both sides. So we're going to do that. So we've used 1.5 on this part, and that's what I'll be using here. So I'll mark it on both sides, and then I will connect my dart to this point. So this line is now serving as a dart leg, and then I'll connect it like so. Also, we are going to take another dart, okay, like a slant line, and to get that, we're just going to come in on this part by 6 inches, and then here we'll come in by ½ inches. We'll connect this point to this point to eliminate this dart, and then from this point we're just going to connect it to the neckline. So this is also a dart we'll be removing, and when we want to cut this on our fabric, we'll now be adding our zipper allowance. So I'll go ahead to cut this out. I'll keep the back aside, so work on the front and close our dart. So when you want to cut this, because we're going to be transferring this pattern to a fabric, before you cut it, based on the darts we have here, we're just going to fold it in like so. Fold in your dart leg, try to close it up. Okay, and when you do that, you can now blend in this place to meet the armhole. So you can just use your marker to create that blend like this. Okay, so when you want to cut it, you're going to cut it straight. So I'll go ahead now to cut this out. So when you release it, this is what you should have. You should have something coming out here, because at the end of the day, when you close your dart, this is how it's going to sit on your dress. So I'll go ahead now to trim out. So this is our front pattern, and for our back, we are going to eliminate the dart as well for the back. So I'm going to cut this off because we don't need this. So this is our back pattern. So we still have to eliminate this particular dart on our waist. So what you're going to do is just cut it out, and then you close it up like so. Okay, so we've eliminated the zipper bulge and the anything that is going to make our zipper protrude in any way, or for it not to rest properly on your back. We've eliminated it. So for this one, we are going to sew it in. All right, so we've eliminated this, and this is the third dart for the back. So you're just going to use your tape and hold it down like so. So we have closed that. So this is going to serve as our center back. You're just going to label it. This is our center back, and this is our side back. Okay, this also is our front, and this is our side front, and this is our center front. So these are our patterns. So lastly, what we need to do is just to redraw this dart leg so that it's straight. If you notice, it's a bit slant because we had closed up this dart, causing it to go slant. Okay, so we have to retrace this dart leg to make it straight. So I'm just going to go in with my ruler and redraw this line to make it straight. And then I will retrace it like so. So when we want to transfer this pattern to our fabric, we'll now be using this dart leg and not this one. Okay, and then we'll be adding our zipper allowance on our fabric. So in case you're wondering, the front is longer than the back. Yes, it's longer, but by the time we close this dart, if you want to join it like so, you realize that you're going to have excess here. But when you close your dart, which is how we'll be closing it on our fabric, and you want to join it, it is going to align. Can you see? So this is how it's going to align when we close our dart. So the front is not going to be longer because we are going to be closing our dart. You can also see how it forms like a curvy effect on this area. This is the result of the bust dart. So it's creating room for it to accommodate your bust on your fabric. Okay, so from your pattern you can see what it's going to look like before you transfer to a fabric. We've come to the end of this basic bodice. We'll go ahead now to transfer this to our fabric. Thank you so much for watching. I'll appreciate if you do well to like, share and subscribe, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. Bye guys.